In general, you should separate as much and use as least privilege as possible. So on a Linux machine, don't work as the root user. Work as a normal user and then change to the root user for thin operations where you actually need it. I know it's super convenient to just use one user, but it's a super bad idea. So you should definitely have multiple users. Security in the end is mostly a matter of mindset. I might sound a little bit paranoid, but I've seen a lot of stuff, and that is not theoretical, it's really happening. So there are big groups that do this, and like they will not burn a $20 million exploit on you personally, but for example, these advertisers, they track all of you constantly. You can be pretty sure that Facebook and Google know more about you than some of your friends. So on a little bit more technical level, you need to create an environment that is distinct from your main environment, and you can do that however you like. So you can use different Linux users, you can use containers, you can use VMs. In the end, it doesn't matter, but you need to be able to easily change from one to another. So all of these exploits that I showed, if I would have done that as a different user, not my main user Johannes, but let's say as Johannes developer or whatever, then an attacker would only be able to compromise that part and not like also my private banking and everything, because I run that as a different user. And the important part here is automate this. Because if that is inconvenient for you, then you will not do it. People are lazy, including me, and if it takes you 5 minutes to change all of that every time you need to do it, then you will soon not do it. So I, for example, use virtual machines. I have a super easy way for me to spin up a different virtual machine. If I want to look at some untrusted code, I spin this up, work in the virtual machine, and afterwards I delete the virtual machine and so that is a really good way to secure work there. The simpler it is to use, the better. So simplicity is more important than absolute security. Because if you have this super secure way of working that you don't use because it annoys you so much, then you have gained nothing. So really better to something that is not as secure but convenient for you. The really important part is not to prevent someone from hacking you, it's to prevent the hacker from staying persistent on your machine. So the exploits that I showed earlier, I ran it in a container, and afterwards I killed the container. So that means that the exploit that I showed is not gone. But if I do the same thing on my main machine that I used for years, and someone manages to compromise this, then it will be able to compromise me for years to come. So throw away these environments as often as possible. My phone, for example, is configured to reboot every night. And that's kind of annoying because I have to enter my password every morning. But it also means that if someone compromises my phone today, and if they don't have persistence on here, then the reboot will kill it, and that's a quite good way against attackers. So the iPhone, for example, does that also if you don't unlock your phone for 3 days or something like that. So that's a really effective way against malware on Android or mobiles in general. On the low-level stuff, so if you build with your own build service, but I don't think that's that relevant for you. Really try to use KVM building. I showed you it's not like the perfect way to secure yourself, but at least we did not get root code execution. And if you work on Linux, then I would really recommend that you familiarize yourself with some of these tools here, like NSJail, whatever. So these are tools that allow you to easily confine a command that you run. So usually if you run something, it runs with your full privileges, but with NSJ, for example, I can say only expose this single directory to this command. So this process will see nothing else but the content of this one directory. Because like if I run a certain command, it doesn't need to see my private picture or anything. Like I just want to run on the source code. Everything else should be off limits. For builds, the example I showed you I have on my GitHub how secure it is NSJail. So if you use that as a drop-in replacement, you will probably be able to run builds without any problems, and you don't have the problems that I showed you earlier. But nowadays they are actually coming after you. Yeah? So there is big money in hacking developers. Not only open source, also if you work like for a closed source company, if they manage to hack your private devices, your workstation, they will also be able to compromise with a high likelihood this product. It's just money for them. Yeah, it's a money game. And also a lot of people rely on wrong threat models. So there's this great APC, so it's a pretty famous comic. And a lot of people imagine that if they use crypto, then they are super safe. And they forget like the obvious escape route, like people will not try to crack the encryption, they will just beat you to get the password. No? We have that a couple of times now with people in the crypto field. So they had super good security on their computers. So what people do, they kidnap them and then cut off their fingers until they actually gave out the password. So you need to think about your real threat model. And I mean, I assume most of you are not on the same threat model as those people. You're not like NSA people or whatever. But it's also not true that you're not under threat. If you work as an open source developer, there definitely are people that are interested in hacking you. So, thank you much for your attention. I think we have a couple of things left for questions if you have one. I will also be available for the rest of the conference, and you can later reach out to security@SUSE.Asia. This is one of our mailings that we read. And I also have these DAY-2. I also mentioned this earlier already. So it's a local specialty from the place where I come from. Usually you eat it in the winter. You can probably also eat it in summer. I haven't did it before. It's vegetarian, and I would ask you if you take one just to rip it in half so that everyone can have one. Or if not, then many people that want it, you can also take a whole one. You can have that after the talk. Okay. Questions? And I know it was a wild ride. Absolute always have bugs. So how to handle this is first of all install it. And what you also need to do is you need to confine these apps as good as possible. The problem is that like on an old computer, an app can pretty much do everything that you can do. If you look at an Android phone, for example, these apps are much better confined. And you as an end user can't really do that much. Unfortunately, this is something where the operating memory is. So for example, there's now a way to deliver apps in so-called Slack packs. So you run it into a container. These containers then can be configured, for example, to only allow access to certain files. But for user end user, create that application, that's the most important. Because bugs will always be there. Like, I don't think that I will see a world where software will be without bugs. Random Python module, I would not run directly on my system. But if this is a Python module that has been around for a couple of years, has been used by a lot of people, then you need to be pragmatic at a certain point, then I will trust it because, I mean, I also need to get stuff done. Which one? So 0 days are super cool. So 0 days are vulnerabilities where there's currently no patch for them. So someone figured out a vulnerability, wrote an exploit for that, and currently no one knows about this vulnerability. And that is something that does not really happen to people. Like, you will not get hacked by a 0 day. 0 days are super expensive. Like, if you find a 0 day to hack Android via Signal or whatever, then you can get $5 million for that. So
I will not burn $5 million to attack you. If you're Snowden, then I might do that. But like, it is super important for you to patch your stuff because like it's so-called N days, so vulnerabilities that have been known for a while, where there are already updates for it, and people just don't install it, then I take one of these vulnerabilities and hack you with that for no money. Other questions? Come again, please? Yeah. If I would know that, I would either be super rich or super happy. I mean, we try to do a lot, like we do code review, like there's automated code scanning. There are better security practices by now. For example, like a couple of years ago, it was super usual that a single developer just committed code directly to a repository. By now, quite often you have requirements of code review and stuff like that. But there is no real solution for that in the moment. I think that AI will help us to some extent. It's going to be super interesting to see who will be helped more, like if the attackers will be helped more or the defenders. But I think especially like figuring out certain vulnerabilities in software, there's probably a huge promise there in AI. But then again, you run into a similar problem as with antivirus, because if I want to compromise a system and there's an antivirus system on there, then I can just install the same antivirus on my computer, and I will tweak the malware so long until it doesn't trigger anymore. And usually that takes me like 2 hours, and then I'm done with that. So the people that we are up against, they can also use the same systems to like use them and try to change their attack so long until it's not detected anymore. There's no absolute security, we can just make it harder for them and more expensive. Probably since software was there, but in the beginning people were not really interested in that. Like when the internet was started, there were a couple of hundred computers. You could log into every computer because people were just trusting each other. Nowadays there's a lot of money in the internet, and because of that people are now also interested in doing stuff like that. I mean, when I was younger, like 30 years ago when I started in that field, that was basically like a hobby for nerds. And people did not take us seriously. It was super easy to hack computers at the time, but there also was no money there. But with crypto and other ways of extracting money out of that, that then also really increased the risk of supply chain attacks, because now you compromise one developer, and that might be worth millions of dollars if you manage to do this. For documents? I didn't understand. Yeah, I mean, if you use an online converter, you have the big advantage that the code is not directly running directly. The images that we take here, probably no problem. But for example, I have some private images that I probably don't upload to the internet. So depends on your use case. But in general, it is recommended. I think we're over time, so now it's Lebkuchen time. Who wants some? Don't be shy, they are nice.